Alrighty, everybody, welcome to the 10th out of the 12-part series on Star Wars and Judaism, looking at the 12 theatrically released Star Wars movies, at least up until this point in the history of mankind, and how they compare and contrast to related biblical and rabbinic texts. And also, big shout out to Stephanie and Daryl. Thank you for the sponsorship for the Zoom to make this hour long. So we're going to get rolling, and this is the Last Jedi. So here, let's go screen share. Okay, that's not the one I wanted. Let's try that again. Here we go. Okay, Star Wars: Last Jedi. So I will say at the outset, there are different things throughout the movie. I actually took some things out. I could have thrown some things in, left some things out. There's still plenty as it is in this. I do actually have to I don't know if you can see my shirt. It does actually say Last Jedi. It's got our heroes of the Resistance, BB-8, Rey, Poe, and Finn, and then even a little like a Resistance thing. I don't even remember who got this for me. I think it might have been a Hanukkah present for all I know. But anyways, so I'm wearing it for this evening's festivities. So Snoke says in addressing Kylo Ren, the mighty Kylo Ren, when I found you, I saw what all masters live to see, raw, untamed power, and beyond that, something truly special. So I was thinking, hey, that's interesting, because there's an interesting little story in the Babylonian Talmud found on Bava Metzia 84a involving Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So they are early to mid, maybe more mid 3rd century rabbis. And Reish Lakish is fairly well known, and Rabbi Yochanan is probably even more significant as far as 3rd century rabbis go. Does anybody want to volunteer to read? I will happily go. Okay, so one day Rabbi Yochanan was bathing in the Jordan River. Reish Lakish saw him and jumped into the Jordan, pursuing him. He said to Reish Lakish, "Your strength is fit for Torah study." And Reish Lakish said to him, "Your beauty is fit for women," which is an interesting shipping thing there, but I'm not going to go there. And Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "If you return to the pursuit of Torah, I will give you my sister in marriage, who is more beautiful than I am." Again, I'm not going into the shipping stuff. Reish Lakish accepted upon himself to study Torah. Subsequently, Reish Lakish wanted to jump back out of the river to bring back his clothes, but he was unable to return. He didn't have the same strength anymore. And Rabbi Yochanan taught Reish Lakish Bible, taught him Mishnah, and turned him to a great man. So you have someone who's sort of in some sort of power structure, which is Rabbi Yochanan and Snoke, finding someone who's basically got raw, untamed power, and in the form of Reish Lakish. And although he starts to become kind of tamed by it, as it were. I just found it was kind of interesting. We got Kylo again. We get anger / immaturity. And Snoke says, "Skywalker lives. The seed of the Jedi Order lives. As long as it does, hope lives in the galaxy. I thought you would be the one to snuff it out. Alas, you're no Vader. You're just a child in a mask." And then, of course, we get the scene of him in the... can you hear this, by the way? Can you hear this? No? All right, well, can you see the scene? All right, well, we have this. But, of course, we have the scene. He's in the, elevator or the lift, and he just smashes everything, his helmet, the pill lighting, everything. And so he's upset, all this stuff. And this is a text I've brought in previous sessions with, from, again, Babylonian Talmud. This is Shabbat 105b. And we have, Allison Gorin's here. Let's see. And it was taught, so we've seen this text before. I think it's just a really solid one. Here, it's fascinating because we have, Kylo Ren using his anger is seen as a good thing in terms of using it for the dark side, although he's certainly struggling with it. And again, this works insofar as the evil inclination, idol worshiper, and letting the anger take over him, and he's really not even really sure where to go with. Kylo Ren is not. I'm sorry, I need to make sure my pronouns. Kylo Ren is not really sure where he's going, what he's been doing. He's giving himself over to Snoke, giving himself over to the dark side. He killed his father to try. He was, living sort of in that gray area and was trying to shoot for the dark. But Snoke himself says, "You're no Vader. You're a child in a mask." Which, look, if he's trying to strengthen his dark sidedness, this is effective because he then goes and does that. So there is some of this stoking the fires of the evil inclination, as it were, and hopefully he can go and serve the dark side even more. Okay, there's a really cool thing which I didn't know what to do with, which is there's no light left in Kylo Ren. He's only getting stronger. The First Order, I'm just going to walk out with a laser sword and face down the whole First Order. What did you think was going to happen? Really cool dialogue. I don't have any clear connection to make, but maybe someone somewhere will have a really good one. Okay, milk. All right, we're going to move on to milk. So we have this, curious scene. Rey sees what Luke does on a daily basis and how he procures his sustenance. And one of these things is milking these creatures, which I don't remember off the top of my head what they're called. I should have done that for research, but they do actually have a name. And it's obviously meant to be kind of a strange and somewhat like tongue-in-cheek sort of scene, silly. But I actually was thinking about milk and what you can consume. So we have basically this Mishnah, and I actually bolded this piece, Mishnah Bechorot, in the first chapter, and it's in Mishnah, so it's first couple of centuries of the Common Era. And hayotzi mehatame, tame b'hayotzi minhator. So whatever emerges from an impure animal is considered to be impure, and vice versa. So that's why cow's milk, goat's milk, these are kosher animals, and their milk is fit for consumption, whereas like pig's milk is not. So we do have, that's really it. I mean, I was trying to see if is there any special process at some point in which you can consume the milk afterwards, but like straight from the udder is not okay, but I didn't come across anything. But basically, that's what I was thinking about milk. Speaking about procuring sustenance, we have Luke spearing a fish. Now, one thing I wanted to, I did find, no, I didn't have a good text here for it. So animals, if they are like cattle or even fowl, if they, basically any non-aquatic animal, if Jews are supposed to eat them, so in rabbinic literature, they need a special type of cessation of their life. They need it shechita, they need to have their neck slit in a certain way, all that good stuff. But fish, kosher aquatic animals, do not need a specific type of cutting of their necks. And so fish can be just chop their head off and be consumed. And also the same thing goes with, it's interesting because technically in rabbinic law, it's not like you could take a spear and throw it at a deer because it needs to be killed in a certain way. But fish can be speared, can be caught. It doesn't, yeah. Of course, I threw in this Leviticus text here of aquatic animals requiring fins and scales to be kosher, but I was really actually more interested in actually the killing of the animals for consuming them. Any questions so far? All right. Okay, so special place. It's interesting in talking about this Jedi temple on the island of Ahch-To, and it's a Jedi temple. I'm not really sure what they do there. It seems to be just a glorified, forgotten library. Really, it's not really where worship is centered and focused on. We have this dialogue between Luke and Rey. He asks, "Who are you? I know this place." earlier, I think earlier on, I don't know, maybe it was earlier on, or maybe even I removed it. This is the dialogue where he says, "Where are you from?" She says, "Nowhere." He says, "No one's from nowhere. Where are you? Where somewhere?" "I'm from Jakku." "Okay, you are from nowhere." Okay, that is nowhere. But he says, "Built 1,000 generations ago to keep these," pointing to the books. The original Jedi texts, just like me, they're the last of the Jedi religion. You've seen this place, you've seen this island, only in dreams. So it's a temple, it's a Jedi temple, but it's more, I'm just going to tell you, it's more like a glorified Jedi text library, like a special text library. Nevertheless, I did want to throw in this from Deuteronomy 12, which is basically, but basically the idea is the temple for in biblical stuff where the temple is supposed to be, although it's not specified that it's supposed to be in Jerusalem, but ultimately when Moses is telling the Israelites, when you ultimately come to the land, there will be a certain place that you're going to designate as a particular place that you're going to do the worship, offer up the animals, do the libations and all that stuff, and do it in a particular place. Right, be sure not, if the place where the Lord has chosen to establish, yeah, you shall offer your burnt offerings, both the flesh and the blood. But such sacred and votive donations as you may shall be taken by you to be to the site that the Lord will choose. You shall offer your burnt offerings, both the flesh and the blood, on the altar of the Lord your God. And of your other sacrifices, the blood shall be da-da-da. But basically, this is a particular place where the center of worship is. This is the Holy Temple. Ultimately, will be in Jerusalem. The Bible doesn't specify Jerusalem, or at least the Torah doesn't specify Jerusalem. That comes hundreds of years later. But the idea is a little bit different as far as the Jedi temples, where we don't, like, even when we see in the prequel trilogy, the Jedi temple in Coruscant is, we don't see any worship. It's more of a center for studying, training, and all that. So it's a different sense of what that is. Stephanie, you got something?
Wouldn't that make sense, though? Because the Jedi religion is, so way back when I started religious studies, we had like, there's certain things that are required to be a religion. One, of course, is a belief in a higher power, which the Force does qualify for that. But there's nothing that actually says that you have to worship said higher power. So with the Jedi religion, it's more about, it's almost like Buddhism in a way, right? Because it's just how you live your life, what you believe in. So, I don't know that we would expect to see worship in the temples. I had a question about this because and I could be completely wrong because it's been a while since I've looked at my academic stuff. Was there not, and I'm thinking pre-Babylonian exile, were there not little temples, for lack of a better word?
Yes. So
where people could go?
before they set up, before King David, I mean, ultimately it was King Saul, but like King David like got it ready, and then King Saul really ultimately built it. But that was hundreds of years later after they entered into the land. So in the span of that time, they had different centers where they would set up different altars. So the book of Judges, I'm pretty sure it's in the book of Judges. You see some battles over fighting for, I could be mistaken, I don't remember off the top of my head. Book of Judges, maybe it's the book of I want to say Samuel or something, where there is this vying, there is this fighting. It's almost like capture the flag, where at some point like the holy stuff gets taken by someone else, the Philistines, and we have to take it back. But yeah.
No, I'm thinking of like small temples where the priests would kind of hang out, live, whatever, function. Literally, like, so, say there was this big central one, but people couldn't conceivably get there. So there would be like these little temples where they could go to offer the burnt offerings, or am I just completely lost it?
We have that at the beginning of, I think it's the book of Samuel, where Hannah goes and she starts praying, and then the priest, I'm pretty sure his name is Eli, he says, have you drunk some wine or beer? Like, you're a little like being weird. And she's like, no, I'm just praying. You can't hear me, but I'm praying, and I haven't drunk any beer or wine. So yeah, that's an instance of that where she just went to like her local temple, and there was a
But
priest.
also after the split of the kingdom, like I think maybe Stephanie, what you're talking about is like there was the central temple of Jerusalem, but after the kingdom split, after Solomon, right, and then the kingdom split to the north and the south, and then Yeravam built more like altars and stuff, which was kind of like against God because you're all supposed to go to the central temple. But later on, like Melechim and all that, there were also like other places, especially down in Israel after they like built a wall and like started shooting people when they tried to go to the temple in Jerusalem anyway. It was in the Yehuda territory. So that was also like they definitely had, and it seems also that even though it wasn't technically permitted, like they continued to exist, that people had like personal altars and they're like personal priests that came and did stuff also, I think. So I don't know, that's something
that makes a little, that kind of sounds familiar, but that's what I always think of with like the little Jedi spots is kind of like that. Like, okay, there's the big one, but we have these other little spots that hold significance.
Cool. Right. So yeah, so that's what I was thinking about, this special place, the temple, and we have this. I really wanted to get a different rabbinic text, and maybe there's a better one out there, but we have this instance where Rey really wants Luke to teach her. He's the last Jedi. He's the great famous Luke Skywalker. He blew up the first Death Star. Something inside me has always been there then. Now it's awake, and I'm afraid. I do not know what it is or what to do with it, and I need help. You need a teacher, but I can't teach you. Why not? I've seen your daily routine. You're not busy. You milk, you fish. I will never train another generation of Jedi. I came to this island to die. It's time for the Jedi to end. And then ultimately, I don't know, she prevails upon him, changes his mind, and later on, through her persistence, he says, tomorrow done. 3 lessons. I will teach you the ways of the Jedi and why they need to end. So this persistence on her behalf, her approaching him and then continuing to approach him, reminds me of, and people who've been in the series should hopefully be familiar with this quote by now, of Yehoshua ben Prachia says, Aseh lecha rav, make a teacher for yourself, ukni lecha chaver, acquire a friend for yourself, ahavedan, es kol ha'adam l'chafzachos, and judge everyone with the scale weighted on the favorable side. Okay, so, and Yehoshua ben Prachia is far, I don't remember exactly when he lived. He could have been in the BCE era, he could have been in the first century or the Common Era, but goes way back. But Rey really is making a teacher out of him. Like, she really is going for it and making the effort rather than just saying, fine, I'll be taught. She's being proactive in that.
Can I say something? Yeah,
Absolutely.
This conversation between Rey and Luke like reminds me a lot more of like the convert like coming to Shammai and saying like, teach me the whole Torah on one foot, and him like turning him away a few times, and then him going to Hillel and Hillel saying, okay, like here's what you need to know. Like I feel like you've got like both of those personalities in like what's happening with Luke, like turning her away. And I feel like also she does have this, I feel like she is coming also kind of more like how I think of like a convert. Like I had this feeling that there's like this religion I want to be a part of, or this whatever, like come, and he's like turning her away. So I don't know, I think that's like a really interesting dynamic in relation to like Judaism and people trying to come to Judaism and being specifically turned away.
I like that. That's a good perspective on it. Cool. There is something, as you're pointing out, of someone who has a certain knowledge set, and there's only like, it's not easily accessible otherwise. And I think here it's even further exacerbated that he is the final Jedi, right? There's no one else that he could learn this, or she could learn this from. It has to be him, right? All right. So, Force. This is the first lesson of the 3. Did I include the second one? I might have deleted the second one. Oh, I did include it. All right. I took out the 3rd lesson. I really wanted to include it, but I'll make a comment on it. So, what do you know about the Force? It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people. It makes things float. Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong. Lesson 1, sit here, legs crossed. The force is not a power you have. It's not about lifting rocks. It's the energy between all things. A tension, a balance that binds the universe all together. I could have thrown in the scene where he slaps her on the hand, which is good. But one thing I thought about because the force is like a godlike power in the Star Wars universe, and I can't help, whenever I hear the force, I can't help yet but think about God. So I found this set of verses from Psalms from Tehillim. Basically, the idea is that God's everywhere. That if I take wing with the dawn to come to rest in the western horizon, even there, your hand will be guiding me. Your right hand will be holding me fast. And here's what's really cool, because you get some darkness and lightness, which is if I say, surely darkness will conceal me, night will provide me with cover. And darkness is not dark for you. Night is as light as day. Darkness and light are the same, which has this balancing effect, which I think is a really fascinating, correspondence with sort of Luke's first lesson as this. God can be both dark and light. It's a nice one. Okay, so I didn't really have a corresponding text for this one, but we have more force and breathe, just breathe, reach out with your feelings. What do you see? The island, life, death, and decay that feeds new life, warmth, cold, peace, violence, and between it all, balance, energy, a force. And inside me, the same force. And this is the lesson. That force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. And I kind of, to some degree, think back to this verse, this selection from Psalms that I just pointed out in Psalms 139. I think that's a nice, again, it's this like balance piece, light and dark, and God being everywhere. Cool. Any questions? Gambling. We have this Canto Bite sequence, and there's a lot of gambling. We've talked about this before in the series, but if you're less familiar, gambling doesn't really, I don't think it really gets mentioned in biblical literature and rabbinic literature. They talk about it. They're aware of it. People gamble. It's part of human life. The rabbis really just bring it up in a very limited context, not really even trying to pass necessarily a really moral judgment, except really limiting gamblers' abilities to provide testimony. That's it. So we have here in the Mishnah, dice player is one of the few people who are not qualified to either be judges nor witnesses. I think witnesses is a little bit, I think judges is one thing. Witnesses is an interesting, I don't know, gamblers could witness stuff too, and yet they're excluded. And the rabbis discuss, what's the deal with this? And ultimately the rabbis say, well, maybe because they're not really involved with Bishuvu Shel Olam. They're not really dealing with settling the world. Okay, it's basically like they're not as conclusive, right? They can go in either direction, as opposed to, and maybe what the rabbis understand is that you need someone when they're providing testimony that it's solid, right? You see something and that happened, and that's what you're going to tell, as opposed to something where things can go in different ways and who knows. So it's an interesting little piece. Okay. The second lesson is of Luke's lessons to Rey is lesson 2. Now that they're extinct, the Jedi are romanticized, deified. Oh, defied, interesting. Deified. But if you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure, hypocrisy, hubris. So the clear connection would be to rabbis, although the rabbis tend not to really talk about their own hubris or hypocrisy. And I don't think that they would consider themselves to think of it as failure. If I did have to point to something, it would be this, and I should have included this here, but there's a story that leads to the downfall of, I'm pretty sure it's the Second Temple, but there's a story of, oh my gosh, what are their names? But there are two guys who have a fairly similar name, and one gets the invitation that's meant for the other guy. And he ultimately shows up at some party, and he shows up at the party, and they're like, wait a second, we didn't invite you. well, yeah, he did. I got the invitation. No, we meant this other guy with a very, very, very similar sounding name. And the rabbis don't stand up for him, right? They basically kick him out. What does he do? He goes, reports them to the Roman authorities, and that starts a series of events that ultimately leads to the destruction of the temple. So that's not good. We got to chat. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. I don't know why I had a brain, but yes, Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Thank you. Thank you so much, Farah. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. That's clearly a failure of the rabbis, and that ultimately, that I don't know if it's hypocrisy or hubris, but they just don't intercede, and that small social dust up leads ultimately to the destruction of the temple, which is, yeah, it's pretty bad. Of course, we could probably also talk about and go in a very different direction in talking about the Gospels and how the Pharisees are portrayed as being hypocrites and all that stuff, but that's not part of the canon that we're dealing with. It's not our canon, okay? But that would be a very interesting, thing to bring in here. I will say I was really tempted to bring in the third lesson. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with the third lesson, which is unfortunately a deleted scene. And I literally did have it in here, and I made the mistake of deleting it also, because I think that the third lesson that Luke teaches Rey is really significant to the movie, and also shows why Luke turned the way he did and wanting to support the resistance efforts, and why he actually, even though it's just a force projection, and transports himself to create by hologram and not by force projection. It's really a turning point in Luke's story and the story of The Last Jedi in general. What I was thinking with have people seen the deleted scenes? Have you seen this third lesson? Okay, I'll do I was going to show it, but apparently it's not, the audio is not working. But here's the basic summary of it, but you can go on YouTube and find deleted scene, like Luke village scene. So Luke says, oh my gosh, here's the third lesson. So-and-so is in trouble, you got to go help them. So, Rey takes her lightsaber and she dashes off. She goes super duper fast. And I'm actually pretty sure that some of her fleet-footed running is in one of the trailers at some point for this movie. It just is a scene that ultimately gets deleted. And she runs and hurries and rushes, and she ultimately makes it to the caretaker's village. And the caretakers, as we see them, at least on screen, they're just a bunch of women, right? They're the women folk. They're these like kind of fishy folks. And then she comes in and she's got her like lightsaber raised, and there's a big party there. And it's just people got music and they're dancing and they're eating. And the men have returned from their time away at sea. They come away, apparently once a month, they're home for a few days, and they throw a big party for a few days, and they eat and they drink, and then the men go back out. So she caught them just as the men had been back in port, and she was like very upset and disappointed. She ultimately goes over to Luke and says, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you playing games? People's lives are hanging in the balance. Resistance really needs you. Like, why are you messing around? And that ultimately is a turning point for Luke. I was actually tempted for that scene to use the text from the 3rd chapter of Kohelet, of a time to laugh and a time to laugh and a time to cry, a time to basically like kill, and a time to all these different things. And it's just like, because they're at such an incredible juxtaposition in that scene of like her ready to fight, but they're ready to party. And I was very tempted to throw that in, but I wasn't compelled to, and that was a mistake. I should have left it in. All right, we have, I'm very excited about this. Killing someone on account of what they will become. Okay, so we have in this movie, has anybody seen the movie, was it Rashomon? The Akira Kurosawa movie? So for anybody, Akira Kurosawa was this Japanese filmmaker in the, I want to say 50s, 60s, maybe 70s. I'm not really sure. He's actually, I think one of his movies was an inspiration for A New Hope for George Lucas. I don't remember what it was called. I should actually go ahead and see it one of these years. And but another of his movies, Rashomon, has basically the same exact story, but told from 3 different points of view from different characters involved in the incident that happens in the Rashomon movie. And that's basically what happens here in Last Jedi. We have 3 different accounts of what happens in this. What's the chat? Hidden Fortress. Thank you, dear sister. Thank you. Hidden Fortress is the Akira Kurosawa movie that serves as the inspiration for George Lucas creating A New Hope. So Rian Johnson, in creating this movie, said, why don't we take from another Akira Kurosawa movie in this Rashomon? We have 3 different versions of this exact same scene that we got looping on GIF right now. The first scene is that I think Luke says, oh, Kylo Ren came at me while I was sleeping. He was about to kill me. And then we have the exact opposite version from Kylo. And then this, I think, is kind of the third one, if I remember. I could be misremembering. Anyways, but this is basically what happens. Luke says, thank you, brother-in-law. Thank you, Josh, who was off screen, for the Hidden Fortress heads up. Okay, so we have the scene, and Luke is very scared because Kylo is turning to the dark side. And we have, as far as killing someone on account of what they will become, of what they will become. We have this story in Genesis in the 21st chapter, and we have Hagar, and Abraham hears that basically his son Yitzchak is very concerned. Abraham is very concerned about his son Yitzchak, who he finds out the direction he's going to go in the rest of his life. And he basically says, ta-ta, goodbye, and sends Hagar, who's the mother of Yaakov, or whatever. Oh my gosh, Ishmael. Oh my gosh. All right, what an evening. Okay, of Ishmael. So Abraham sends off Ishmael and Ishmael's mother Hagar. Hey Ben, welcome. So sends them off, and because he's like, it's not going to be good. And but ultimately, God, or an angel of God, calls and says, actually, come back. Now, the interesting thing is, there is a good phrase in here, Ba'asher Husham. Okay, so at the very end of verse 17, we have that that God heard the voice of the child, Ba'asher Husham, and in the English is for God, that God hears the kid, the child, where he is currently at. Meaning, and that's really what's get highlight, as we see in the Babylonian Talmud of Rosh Hashanah 16b, where Rabbi Yitzchak says, a man is only judged only according to his deeds at the time. And here Rabbi Yitzchak quotes from this Genesis thing, exactly this line, Ki Shema Elohim El Kol Hanar Ba'asher Husham. Again, this particular line. So it's only at that time. Now, the larger context is also, there's a sense of, where is it? It's in the book of Numbers, the Ben Sor or Mora, that this wild and rebellious kid who's a guzzler of wine, and he just he eats a bunch of steak. It's a huge concern, and they're supposed to be killed at that time, which is an interesting contrast to Ishmael and what happens. But again, there is something to be said. I could have thrown a whole bunch of Ben Sora Mora, the wayward and rebellious kid stuff here, which probably would have been really great, in addition to these texts. But again, one of the lessons, I will say, I'm going to go ahead and go with the Ben Sora Mora. The rabbis are deeply anxious about this whole notion of, what do you mean killing this kid who is, just wildly drinking wine and eating copious amounts of meat and being a wild child and all these things? Okay, he might be like a crazy teenager, but like, come on. So what they ultimately do is they so severely limit the parameters into which someone could actually fit that it becomes almost ridiculously impossible to actually ever kill a kid for these actions. Now, and I think this is reflected in what I just quoted from Rabbi Yitzchak here in Rosh Hashanah and the Babylonian Talmud, which is to say that it's only at that time. Don't think about this kid's future, only just now. So I think that's a big thing. Even though Luke was very concerned, that's nice, but don't kill. Don't go around killing kids who are still in training. Okay. All right, moving along. Let the past die. Oh yeah, Allison. Yeah, you got something.
So I was just thinking when you were saying that, I remember reading like in the Midrash says or whatever, when Paro was killing the Jewish babies and putting them into the pyramids as bricks and all that. Like in the Midrash, if I remember correctly, like Moshe says, well, can't we save like one of these children, and isn't it horrible? So he's able to save one of them. And it turns out that child ended up being like the one like who grew up to be the magician who made the golden calf or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so like it was like to show, okay, it's horrible, these children are being killed, but maybe there's like some whatever reason behind it all.
Yeah. It could. Yes. Although the rabbis were definitely concerned about judging a kid where he's at the time.
But yeah.
Kids can grow. People can mature.
Not become evil magicians. Yes.
Evil magician. That's good.
But nothing. Yeah.
Okay, so letting the past die. So we have the scene where Kylo Ren speaks to Rey, let the past die, kill it if you have to. That's the only way to become what you were meant to be. Now, this is an interesting scene. Something that I was thinking about was a transition. And there's something to be said about, now look, the rabbis aren't keen on killing the past. They're super duper huge on tradition. That's huge for them. But there is, I'm gonna think come again. There's something to be said when the temple was being destroyed. The temple in Jerusalem was being destroyed in the late 1st century of the Common Era. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai came along and he had to make some changes. He didn't have to, but he went ahead and he made some changes. And so we have one of them here. The sages taught, again, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Rosh Hashanah, and we have probably a late 2nd century text here. The priests are not allowed to ascend with their sandals to the platform, and this is one of the 9 ordinances that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai instituted. Now, I should have changed that translation of ordinances, because what does an ordinance even mean? Because the literal translation are fixes, okay? These are takanot, they are the hitkin, the Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai went ahead and fixed these 9 different things. Now, basically what he did was saying, look, the ways that we had when we had the temple standing are great. But now that we're in an entirely new era that we haven't experienced for hundreds of years, and we have to be able to reconstitute Jewish practice as we know it in a temple-less existence, we have to make some changes. So this is actually one of the smallest changes, is priests not being able to ascend with their sandals to the platform when they're giving the priestly blessing. But he's basically saying, look, we need to adjust. We need to not necessarily let the past die, but we need to make a pivot. Things are going to be different now. Ultimately, like another of them was Lulav and Esrog, bringing those that they were brought all 7 days of Sukkot in the Beit HaMikdash, but outside of that, or Jerusalem, but outside of there, everywhere else, it was just the first day. And he said, no, you know what, now it'll be the entire week. We'll do that everywhere. All right. Another change we have. Another change and also destruction. Okay. Luke says, so it is time for the Jedi Order to end. And this is with Force Ghost Yoda. I should have changed that from Yoda to Force Ghost Yoda. So Yoda says, time it is for you to look at a pile of old books. The sacred Jedi texts. Oh, read them, have you? Well, page turners they were not. Yes. Wisdom they held. But that library contained nothing that the girl Rey does not already possess. Skywalker, still looking to the horizon. Never here now. So, it's really, like Luke is in such a strange position here, because he was going to do something to them, but then Force Ghost Yoda beat him to the punch and burning the Jedi Temple, holding, or as I like to call it, the Jedi Library tree. But he burns it up first, and Luke is deeply concerned about the texts. But Yoda makes a really fascinating point, which is, yeah, they had books, but Rey already has contained nothing the girl does not already possess. Now, I'm going to tell you two absolutely different things. The first is, actually, when you think about what Force Ghost Yoda says, when he says the library contained nothing that the girl Rey does not already possess, Luke doesn't know that she's actually taken the books out of the Jedi library and taken them to the Millennium Falcon. Okay, so Force Ghost Yoda is telling the truth here because she literally physically has these books, but Luke doesn't know that. But I think the more surface understanding of that, even though Force Ghost Yoda is telling the truth, she's already built for them, but the idea of the knowledge contained within the books, but not needing the books to know them. Now, this reminded me of something that Rava said. So Rava is one of the greatest sages of the entire Talmud. He lived out in a suburb of the capital city of Ctesiphon, and he was a huge 4th century rabbi, and he had some interesting things to say, especially here, about really of not necessarily valuing written stuff, but deeply valuing, I think, the oral Torah aspect of what the rabbis really, that was a big part of rabbinic culture, is the oral memorization. So he said, how foolish are so many people who stand before a Torah scroll, and yet they stand before a Torah scroll, but then when a great man comes through, they don't stand. So as in a Torah scroll, 40 is written, and the sages came and subtracted 1. And what he's talking about is lashes that someone would receive for doing certain things. And here he said the sages had the power to adjust it. And basically the idea is Rava's really asserting it's one thing to have written text, but to really have a knowledge of it is really quite important. And he's also really trying to assert the power of the oral Torah and not just the written Torah. Okay. Any thoughts, questions, comments, questions, queries? Ready to move along?
What's the deal with the 3940 number there? Is that like
it's about lashes. I don't remember for which transgressions, but the Torah says you get 40 lashes, and the rabbi said, let's just make it 39. We're going to take one out. That's the context. But basically the idea is that Rava is coming and saying, look, you want to give so much power to standing in front of rising up because of giving honor to a Sefer Torah, to a Torah scroll, but what about a knowledgeable Talmid Chacham? You should give that to them also.
Are they trying to say the sages have more power because they were able to change what's written in the Torah? Kind of?
Yep.
Right, thank you.
There's another, Ben, if you're interested, there's also an exchange also involving Rava with a certain Benjamin Harofei, a certain Dr. Benjamin on Sanhedrin 99b and 100a. And Dr. Benjamin is, he's a smart guy, and he's giving crap to a rabbi for stuff. Rabbi, how come it says this about this, the kosherness of this bird, the kosherness of that bird? And Rava's able to use some nice, thinking, and sort of, it's worth checking out. I'm happy to share with you. Okay. All right, now we get to one of the toughest scenes for me. It was just so mind-blowingly infuriating and frustrating. We have basically wanton destruction. So I tossed in a couple of GIFs here. We see Finn and Rose hopping on these I was going to say on these fathiers, but they're on one fathier together, and they're riding throughout the streets of Canto Bight and beyond, and wrecking so much destruction. Just crazy amounts of totally wanton destruction that is entirely unnecessary. Breaks my heart. Okay. I mean, it's terrible. I did throw in one thing here, one text, but I can't even begin to. Well, okay, so basically the text here I have is from the Babylonian Talmud. It's from Shabbat 129a, and what we have is we see these rabbis from the 3rd and early 4th century, and they're talking about you can break down certain things. You can break things as long as they are of a particular use to you. You can destroy things as long as ultimately they say do this. There is a prohibition of do not destroy, of bal tashchit, which ultimately derives from the prohibition from Deuteronomy 20:19, which the context over there is about fruit-bearing trees. If you come across a city to lay siege to it, that you can cut down trees to for siege works and all that, as long as there are no fruit-bearing trees, because that would be a problem. But if they're non-fruit-bearing trees, that's okay. And the rabbis took from that a sort of a rabbinic notion not to destroy things unnecessarily for like whatever. You shouldn't be destroying things unnecessarily. I also could have thrown in texts here, and anybody else could, and this would be a really interesting thing of destructive acts and who's culpable for payment. And obvious, there's no question here. Finn and Rose are clearly culpable for all of this physical material destruction they're wrecking throughout the city of Canterbury. And I don't know. I'm just really upset by this whole scene. There's no purpose for it. It's stupid. I get that they're trying to get away, but there's no reason for them to be destroying, all this property of the good citizens of Canterbury. Okay. Thank God. I was horribly distressed by that. Okay, so we have this interesting scene. They hop on the ship, and DJ says, I stole it. Finn says, yeah, I got that. We stole it. At least you're stealing from the bad guys and helping the good. Good guys, bad guys, made up words. Let's see who formerly owned this gorgeous hunk. This guy was an arms dealer. Made his bank selling weapons to the bad guys. Oh, and the good. They're supporting both sides. They're just businessmen or businesswomen. Like, that's all they are. It's not, they're clearly working for the bad side. It's it's more morally murky than that. I don't have a good corresponding rabbinic or biblical text for that. It just, there's no real good reason to just like steal people's stuff. I don't have a good way out of that. There's no, as far as I know, there's no good Robin Hooding in the Talmud, but maybe it's somewhere hidden in a nook and cranny of rabbinic literature. All right, we have dark and light. Okay, so Snoke says, "Come closer, child. So much strength. Darkness rises, and light to meet it. I warned my young apprentice that as he grew stronger, his equal in the light would rise." I don't have a really good close textual corresponding thing, but I do have this, which is Abaye went and leaned against the doorpost and feeling regret. There's a broader context of the story, but this is really the meat of what I want to get at. A certain elder came and taught him, anyone who is greater than another, his evil inclination is greater than his. So the idea is that somehow someone who is, someone who is greater in some sense, whatever it is, that their evil inclination will also rise. And that's what came to my mind when the Snoke line says, well, yeah, this lightness and darkness coming to rise, right? Now this is the opposite. So just as Kylo Ren is getting darker, the light side is also coming up to meet it. I went in the opposite direction from this certain elder that basically as someone who hopefully in their light-sidedness is, and here the particular context is about like Torah study, like the more Torah you study, or it could be politically, right? Or it could be even business. If you're just like significant in whatever you are, you also have a good Yetzer, hara that also is significant there. So that's that came to mind. If someone has a different or better text, I'm open to that as well from what is from this. How do you restrain your evil impulse? Does your ability to control it grow alongside it? That's a great question. Whole other conversation. I would hope your ability to control it would grow along. That would be interesting if it could also be like a bootstrapping thing where you have a great growing evil impulse and then somehow you're able to also, kind of grow your lighter side, your Yetzer Tov, your positive, your good influence, your good right? Your good inclination to also rise to meet it. But yet, when you do that, then the Yetzer Hara grows, and but that bootstrapping can also help make you a greater individual because you're able to control and deal with it. That's my al regal achad answer. So, all right. Okay, so our final section is moving inanimate objects telekinetically. We have this great kind of a denouement of the movie where Rey, we saw her earlier when we were on Achto, where she, puts down her hand, and then we have a little bit of the pebbles, floating in midair. And here it's much grander, that she raises her hand and these huge, huge rocks move aside, allowing our heroes, the remnants of the resistance, to escape from their little base. So I have a couple of texts involving Rabbi Eliezer. We have what's known as the Tanur Shal Achnai, or the Achnai oven story, that occurs in the Babylonian Talmud in Baba Metzia 59b. Now, this is from so Rabbi Eliezer is late 1st century of the Common Era, and it was taught on that day. Rabbi Eliezer answered all answers in the world, but the rabbis did not accept from him. He said to them, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, this carob tree will prove it. So the carob tree was uprooted from its place 100 cubits or 400 cubits and went somewhere totally else. The rabbi said to him, one doesn't cite halacha proof from the carob tree. So he said to them, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, the stream will prove it. So the stream went in the opposite direction. It flowed the other way. They said, and one does not cite proof from a stream. He said to them, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, the walls of the study hall will prove it. So the walls of the study hall leaned to fall, but then Rabbi Yoshua scolded the walls and said to them, if Torah scholars are contending with each other in matters of halacha, what's the nature of your involvement in this dispute? So they did not fall due to the deference due to Rabbi Yoshua, but they did not straighten to the deference of Rabbi Eliezer, and they still remained leading. So Rabbi Eliezer said to them, if the halacha is in accordance with my opinion, heaven will prove it. A divine voice emerged from heaven and said, why are you differing with Rabbi Eliezer? The halacha is in accordance with his opinion in every place. And Rabbi Yeshua stood on his face and said, lo b'shamayim he, quoting from Deuteronomy, it is not in heaven. We don't deal with you. Heaven, stay out of this. You're done. We deal with this here. We're going to adjudicate all these things here. I'm not done. I'm going to do one more thing that's connected, which is it was taught, and this is also Babylonian Talmud. This is from Tractate Sanhedrin. Rabbi Eliezer took ill. Rabbi Akiva and his colleagues came to visit him. He was sitting on his canopy bed, and they were sitting in his parlor. And there's a whole conversation, all these different things. And he says, moreover, I can teach 300 halachot. And some say that Rabbi Eliezer said 3,000 halachot with regard to the planting of cucumbers by sorcery. But no person has ever asked me anything about them besides Akiva ben Yosef. Once he and I were walking along the way, and he said to me, my teacher, teach me about the planting of cucumbers. I said one statement of sorcery, and the entire field became filled with cucumbers. He said to me, my teacher, you have taught me about planting them. What about uprooting them? I said a different statement, and they were all gathered to one place. So we see that Rabbi Akiva, from these two stories here from the Babylonian Talmud, he can make things move. Now, whether they're plants, they're vegetables, water sources, he can make them all move around. Which is, of course, very fascinating that he can, just by saying them, which is like a weird sorcery thing, it's also really weird that he's doing these things. It's great that he has this knowledge of sorcery, but it's also problematic in some sense. But he teaches Akiva them, right? Nevertheless, that's about it for the rabbis being able to move things telekinetically, is these stories of Rabbi Eliezer, because no other rabbis, as far as I remember, can do that sort of thing. It's a Rabbi Eliezer specialty. And but generally, that's not a normal thing for the rabbis, even if it's a typical thing for the Jedi. So that's what I got for The Last Jedi. Thoughts, questions, comments, queries, concerns, things that I missed, things you would have liked for me to have spoken about?
One thing I kind of wanted to bring in a little bit is we're seeing a theme with the lessons and some of the things throughout it of this, we're basically challenging the Jedi traditions. We're challenging the established order, which, while I think was poorly executed, connects nicely back to what the prequels kind of showed us. Is showed us how the Jedi Order had become flawed in a way, you know, with a lot of its subtle demonstrations, but it's there. The Jedi Order is flawed. They have a problem. And so you see in this, I think, a lot of this, okay, we need to challenge this, we need to change this. And, you know, the Jedi Order as it was needs to die, perhaps, but that's why there should be a new one, or however you want to go into that. And so I kind of wondered what kind of connection there is to basically challenging the text, or like trying to question interpretations, or trying to, you know, constantly sort of read and understand and have this discussion. And that seems to be something that I think is very much in Judaism. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but that's why I'm asking about it. But it seems like there would be a connection there and fit with that. And like that, there should be this challenging and sort of rebirth of ideas, or reevaluating, reexamination. Perfect.
Yeah, maybe a reexamination. Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the prequels, because for me, this movie really does an interesting way of inverting the episode 5, right? Because you have an old sage from a forgotten time in a remote place doing one-on-one teaching, right? Meanwhile, our hero, everybody else is sort of out in space fleeing. So, but that's an interesting connection of saying, look, the way that they had it back in the prequel era during the Old Republic, the Jedi ultimately had these vulnerabilities due to perhaps this hubris, this hypocrisy. They had their vulnerabilities, which were ultimately exploited by Darth Sidious, right? Yeah. But yeah, I like what you said. The more meta idea of re-examination, questioning, and really thinking, inwardly and about that is good. Thank you, Daryl. Any other thoughts, comments, questions, queries, concerns, curiosities?
Is this Roshi on Safaria?
Yeah, it is. It is. There it is. It's in the chat. So it's there. It's for everybody. And hopefully, maybe at some later point in time, I'll take the recording of this, chop it up, and put in, bit by segment, pop it back into the Safaria, so that anybody who, wants to see it segment by segment, they can see the recording of this for posterity. Awesome. All right. So we've got, I do want to say, actually, I was thinking about mentioning this earlier. I gained a new appreciation for The Last Jedi after seeing The Rise of Skywalker, because The Rise of Skywalker was such a mess, and yet one of the great things of The Last Jedi was what really struck me is, even though I didn't like a lot of the plot or a lot of the story, but I think in my mind, it was like literally the most gorgeous artistic piece of film in the entire, of all 12 theatrically released Star Wars films. It is just the greatest piece of film that there is. I just happen to not like the story, but like from a visual perspective, from an artistic perspective, it's really incredibly well done. So I'm going to put that out there.
It's a beautiful painting.
Yeah, it is beautiful. Yeah, the visual aesthetics, a lot of, even, I'll say this one scene earlier on where you have Finn. It's kind of funny because he's in that that medical thing with like things sticking out of him, and he's just like walking around, and Poe says to him, I'm sure you have a million questions, and da-da-da-da. He's like, where's Rey? And immediately, and very, like, it just switches to Ahch-To, where we see Rey, and it's like, oh, that was just so well done. And we have, man, I can go on. There are all these different nicely done beats. Of course, we have the great scene with the Praetorian Guard after Snoke's killed, and the great fighting sequence, which is just really, that was just an instant classic of like one of the best Star Wars scenes ever. But there are still even other really great scenes throughout the movie. So
I think it's a little interesting.
Oh, my sister says Last Jedi is my favorite Star Wars movie. So I think it's really great artistic piece of it. There's so much of the story. It was a mistake. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting that a lot of the stuff we talked about today came from the Ahch-To scenes, which for my opinion, I think a lot of people like those were pretty good. Maybe the rest of the movie wasn't as good, but like the Octo scenes definitely had a lot to them. So
Yeah. It's clear that they took a lot of care with the Octo pieces, and yeah, and even artistically and visually, it was really good. It was really good.
I think
So.
the thing with the new trilogy, really the same you can say with the prequels, is if you're expecting the magic that was the original Star Wars, you're always going to be disappointed. But if you take the movies for what they are, they're fine. You know, the new ones are not my favorite either, the new trilogy that is. But for me, because I look at the entire arc, the fact that you have Kylo turn at the end and like that at least closes that arc. So you at least have some closure, but yeah, I think you have to look at these movies and go, okay, well, you know what? On their own merit, they're decent for whether it's artistic or it's, you know, whatever the little part is. But I think that the prequels and the sequels fail because everyone's expecting the magic that was the original, and that can't happen because that ship has sailed. Like that was the first time that could happen. We're past that now.
Yep. I mean, yeah. I mean, I actually really greatly enjoyed the prequels, so I'm in the minority of people. So cool. All right, 2 more weeks left. We got Solo next week, which is a fun movie, and then we finish that up with the Rise of Skywalker. So I'm very stoked. We've made it this far, 10 out of 12. The last 10 weeks, we just got 2 more left, and we'll, you know, it'll be great. A whole full dozen. So thank you so much, everybody. And as always, you